Well, I did one for Pixar, I did one for Disney. The next logical step is to do one for DreamWorks. But I'm not just doing it because I did one for the others. DreamWorks is very important to me. In fact, they're probably my favorite out of the big three. With Disney, they mostly adapt your classic fairy tales, sometimes stepping out of their comfort zone every once in a while. With Pixar, they just seem to be dead set on giving emotions to things that don't typically have emotions. But with DreamWorks, you get all kinds of variety. Yes, there's some bad, but there's some good too, and even some really great movies, and that's what we'll be counting down today. Keep in mind that this is just my opinion. You can like whatever DreamWorks movies you want. But if you enjoy my list, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. With all that said, let's begin my top 10 favorite DreamWorks movies.
Surprise! It's Edith.
First up is Kung Fu Panda 3. Now while it is my least favorite of the Kung Fu Panda trilogy, which probably spoils a few spots coming up on this list, it's still one of my favorite DreamWorks movies. Beautiful animation, the same old cast, and this cool new chi power. And while not as kung fu-y, these more cartoonish slapstick fight scenes are still fun to watch. The plot also continues where the cliffhanger of Kung Fu Panda 2 left off. Po's father is still alive, and when Po reunites with him, he must return to the panda village so he can master chi and learn how to become a panda. And the reason he has to do this is because there's a spirit warrior on the loose by the name of Kai. He's returned to Earth and is gathering the chi of all the masters in China. While not everything was executed as well as Kung Fu Panda 2, it still did do everything right as a sequel. It continued the story, raised the stakes, and offered some new development for characters. Now before Illumination took over DreamWorks, they actually had 6 Kung Fu Panda movies planned, so hopefully we get to see Po return in the future. Kung Fu Panda 3 is number 10.
Much better.
Oh, hello! Oh, surprise! It's Edith.
Captain Underpants, the first epic movie, a title that implies there will be sequels, which, hey, I'm not complaining. Despite this movie having an incredibly small budget for an animated film, it still looks fantastic, likely taking tons of inspiration from the Peanuts animated movie by Blue Sky a few years back. Now, I was a huge fan of the books growing up, but I can safely say that even if you weren't a fan of the books, you'll still find enjoyment in this movie if you give it a shot. The movie isn't just mindless toilet and potty humor, it's more about the childlike wonder of finding that stuff funny. This movie does not take itself seriously in the slightest, it just does whatever it wants with its world and you're going to have fun. But most of all, it did something that I didn't think was possible. It managed to make an animated character voiced by Kevin Hart not the most irritating thing in the world. In fact, I enjoyed him quite a bit in this movie. That's saying a lot. So Captain Underpants, the first epic movie, is number 9.
Can I please get an ice cream sandwich?
Just scram, okay? We're closed for Ebola.
Oh, hello! Oh, surprise! It's Edith.
Mr. Peabody and Sherman. I never hear anyone talk about this movie. Come on! So basically, this movie's about an orphan boy named Sherman, whose parents are wealthy enough to afford eye exams and prescription glasses, but somehow can't take care of him. So he was adopted by a dog who was super smart and could talk, and also was somehow able to get prescription glasses as a pup. Also, he invented a time machine. Okay, yeah, this is pretty weird, right? Well, it was based on a super low budget old cartoon, so you can't really blame them. But despite that, they managed to take this weird concept and turn it into an incredibly charming adventure. The character designs are all fun and crazy like the original cartoon they were based on. They make you care about the relationship between Mr. Peabody and Sherman, and I want to specifically point out that the climax of this movie is especially tense and impressive. Not animation-wise, but story and character-wise. Seeing the super genius and expert at everything Mr. Peabody in a situation that he doesn't know how to handle couldn't have been done any better. While a weird concept for a movie, it turned out the best it could possibly be, and I honestly trust DreamWorks with adaptations after this and Captain Underpants. So Mr. Peabody and Sherman is number 8.
Sherman, I've got to get you out of here before you touch yourself.
Oh, hello! Oh, surprise! It's Edith.
The Croods. Now this is one of DreamWorks' more creative films. They took the simple idea of cavemen and expanded it to a ridiculous level. Now overall, while this movie does hammer in its message of accepting new things a bit too much, it just takes itself so seriously and there's so much heart behind it that it doesn't even feel annoying. In fact, it comes off as sweet and magical like a Disney movie. While only 1 or 2 characters get major development in the movie, everyone is still entertaining to watch. And the animation has got to be some of the best DreamWorks has ever done. Aside from this one scene where the lighting of a fire is really weird, but the rest of the movie is fantastic. The lush environments, the unique and interesting designs of all the creatures and monsters they come across, and the expressive character designs and movement. There's just tons of creativity in this movie, and I invite you all to watch it because there's lots to explore. The Croods is an easy number 7.
Now, kick it away. Really?
Oh, hello! Oh, surprise! It's Edith.
Madagascar, Escape to Africa. Now admittedly, this is one of the more forgettable DreamWorks sequels with its hammered-in message about preserving the wildlife and whatnot. But it was a pretty interesting continuation of the first movie, adding some heart and emotion to the overload of comedy. It still has the same stupid jokes, the same fun characters, and the wacky animation that you loved from the first one. But now we get some backstory for Alex and some major development for the rest of the characters too. All 4 of the main gang, plus a few others, get their time to shine. Now in all honesty, I can't really think of why this movie is this high on the list compared to things like The Croods and Mr. Peabody and Sherman. There's no doubt that those are better movies, but I just happen to enjoy this one more for some reason. I just have this big goofy grin on my face every time I watch it. I guess whether they're in Madagascar, Africa, or Europe, these goofy characters just know how to make me laugh. So Madagascar Escape to Africa is number 6.
I love you, Gloria. I always have.
Oh, hello! Oh, surprise! It's Edith.
Kung Fu Panda, the first one. Now this movie is extremely nostalgic to me. Whenever we'd go see movies in the theaters, they were never anything I really wanted to see. They were just movies that happened to be out at the time and I was dragged along with the family. I don't know why, I guess I just couldn't grasp the concept of hype from trailers yet, even though I was 11. But Kung Fu Panda was the movie to change all that. Once I saw the teaser trailer for this movie in the theaters, I lost my marbles. I had to see this movie, and I was not disappointed. With the insane fight scenes, the wacky humor, and the iconic voice cast, I was 100% hooked. Not to mention, while a decade old at this point, this movie's animation still holds up extremely well. The colors, the environments, and the choreography of the kung fu scenes. Not to mention that killer soundtrack. It was an excellent start to my favorite movie trilogy of all time. Kung Fu Panda is number 5.
My tenders.
Oh, hello! Oh, surprise! It's Edith.
Megamind. In a movie industry cluttered with superhero films, people tend to only look towards The Incredibles when it comes to the department of parody, but Megamind does just as good of a job. Instead of focusing on the hero aspect, Megamind takes it from the viewpoint of the villain, if he were to finally win. Now admittedly, the beginning of the movie is a bit predictable. It goes through the same motions that every movie where the villain wins goes through. They're super happy and they go crazy doing whatever they want now that they have the freedom to do whatever they want, and then they slowly go into a depressing slump. But what no one could have predicted is what Megamind did to get out of that depressive slump, the incredible turn the movie took, creating a new hero for him to fight, bonding with the world and people outside of villainy. There's just so much fun and creative and interesting ideas here, plus a fun little plot twist somewhere. It's wonderfully written and I can safely say that it's definitely DreamWorks' best standalone film. Megamind is number 4.
What's wrong with me? Renting a bouncy house? Chicks don't like bouncy houses, they like clowns. Oh, oh.
Oh, hello! Oh, surprise! It's Edith.
Memes aside, the Shrek movies, except for Shrek the Third, are all pretty good. My personal favorite being Shrek 2. Don't get me wrong, the first movie was still incredibly good and fun to watch, but the second movie set the standard for what the franchise would become. Because of this movie, places like Far Far Away would become the standard location that the rest of these movies would take place in. We got great fan favorite characters like Prince Charming and Puss in Boots, who was so good that he would later go on to get his own spin-off, and it developed this big magical world into something completely of its own, instead of just being some silly Disney fairy tale parody. The development for all these characters are at their peak, the writing is the best in the series with the funniest jokes, and there's so many iconic scenes, whether it be the chaotic dinner scene or Fairy Godmother's cover of I Need a Hero. While the series was still pretty decent afterwards, it just couldn't live up to this masterpiece. But after taking a long break from the land of Far Far Away, it seems DreamWorks is getting ready to bring Shrek back, so let's see what they can do. But for now, Shrek 2 is number 3.
Oh, hello! Oh, surprise! It's Edith.
We gotta train all the dragons. We gotta train the dragons, Dad. We're training the dragons for the second time, Dad. This is How to Train Your Dragon 2. Oh yeah, it's me, Hiccup, and I talk like there's something constantly stuck in my throat. Oh boy.
Oh yeah, this is How to Train Your Dragon 2. An absolute masterpiece. Now DreamWorks, how do you go from stuff like this to stuff like Home or Trolls? With animation so breathtaking, a world that feels so immersive like you could go there yourself, and with characters so interesting that you just want to keep following them on their many journeys. How to Train Your Dragon 2 is something else, like it's even way above Pixar and Disney levels. This movie just shows how drastically different the best parts of DreamWorks and the worst parts of DreamWorks really are. And How to Train Your Dragon 2 is definitely one of the best parts. Let's just hope the third movie can continue that trend. But I gotta admit, the obvious marketing pandering plot that happens to be Toothless getting a girlfriend who's a White Knight Fury, it worries me a little. But that still won't change the fact that How to Train Your Dragon 2 is one of the greats. How to Train Your Dragon 2 is number 2.
I'm still going. I'm done.
Oh, hello! Oh, surprise! It's Edith.
Kung Fu Panda 2. Why is DreamWorks so good at this? This is like the 4th 2 on this list. Now, DreamWorks has made a ton of franchises out of their different movies, but if any of them was going to dominate this list, it was going to be Kung Fu Panda, with the second movie at the front. This has to be the biggest improvement upon a first movie that I've ever seen in animation, and considering how wonderful the first movie was already, that's saying a ton. It multiplied the action several times over, it gave us the greatest villain in the series so far, and it was able to make us take a fat panda doing kung fu voiced by Jack Black completely seriously. This movie had some great development for Po and Tigress, and just like Shrek 2, it set the standard for what the rest of the series would be. Showing what the Dragon Warrior and the Furious Five do, the lengths they have to go through to complete their missions, the new techniques they learn, all of it's here. And most of the great soundtrack from the first movie is brought back for this one, made even better. There's so many iconic scenes for this sequel too. Po deflecting the cannonballs, the inner peace scene, the travel montage, so much stuff. Wrap everything I've set up in a big bag of nostalgia and you'll see why Kung Fu Panda 2 is my number 1.
Oh, hello. I couldn't help it. Oh! Yeah, okay. Anyway,